welcome to the My Kind of Leader podcast. Amo Raju, and thank you so much for your time today. I'm so looking forward to our conversation. We connected on LinkedIn and had a little bit of a to and fro in on there, didn't we? And then it wasn't long before I said, would you come on my pod? And you didn't even ask what it was about, and you said yes, so that was fantastic. So here we are.
Yeah, I talking is not a problem for me. So you know, when you reached out, I was, funnily enough, that particular week I'd done a few podcasts, so I was in the zone, shall we say?
Yes, and I suspect that's come off the back of your new book, right?
It has, yeah.
Here it is.
Walk like a man.
Walk like a man.
Yeah, it was released a few months ago, but the interviews are starting to pick up now.
Right.
And funny enough, straight after this, I've got another one. So it is, it's a good thing, and we may talk about the book later, but it's got some strong messages in there which are starting to resonate with a lot of people. And I think the timing of the book was good in terms of what the world, or what the people out there with similar issues to me are going through right now.
Right, great, perfect. Well, great timing then, even if it's a delayed response.
Sure.
Amo, tell us a bit about you and your company.
Okay, so Amo Raju, short for Amajit. I'm born in the Midlands, in Derby, in the late 60s. I'm a disabled person since birth. I have mild diplegia affecting the right side of my body. So I'm ambulant, but I have a different gait in my walk.
Right.
But I've lived a fairly, I won't say average life, because once you've read the book, you realize it wasn't average. I've done a lot more than most people do. And I think some of that is due to the fact that as a disabled person, we want to push ourselves and challenge ourselves a little bit more than mainstream people in mainstream peers. So yeah, I run a company, a charity called Disability Direct, which is technically a support service for disabled people and carers and anybody with an interest in disability. And I joined the charity when it pretty much started in 1994. I was out of work, had no skills. My background, apart from a few minor jobs in the civil service and within a carpet retailers, I hadn't really got any set of skills. My main background, my interest as a teenager, I was a singer. I was a Bhangra singer.
Were you?
Yeah, semi-successful Bhangra singer. So on
Amazing.
YouTube, there's a few videos out there which still get hits, and my song gets played. My more of the hit song gets played on the Asian radio channels and TV stations regularly. So that's a nice little ego boost every now and then when I'm driving.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, so my background wasn't office-based or in any type of career. I had no path chosen or chose any path to be particularly. After a few years of unemployment and severe bout of depression, I just basically was steered into volunteering for a brand new charity called Disability Direct in an admin role. And it was, if I'm honest with you, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because my eyes were opened within days of joining the charity that I'd lived, as a disabled person, I'd lived in a non-disabled world. But having started with a disability charity, I was immediately put in the middle, in the mix of other disabled people with much more strongly affecting conditions than I had. And these guys were making a real go of it and doing something spectacular for the community. And I just, my mentor at the time was my old boss, Richard Shaw. And he saw something in me and could see that I was probably going to be running the organization at some stage. and within a year or so taught me everything that I know, even to this day. I mean, Richard left the charity back in '96, but even now he rings me up every now and then and gives me a bit of an ear bashing.
That's amazing to download all of that to you.
Well,
To be his successor, I guess.
Well, kind of, I mean, and it was, you know, we're talking about leadership. You know, I don't believe there's a training manual for leaders. It was the situation was pretty much thrust on me.
Right.
He left because he wanted to look after his health and didn't, and quite rightly, I don't blame him. He took early retirement, and I was kind of left holding a baby, a screaming baby, in this charity with 3 staff who I'd never been a manager. So I was looking after staff and looking after budgets, and expected to, you know, these guys, volunteers too, were looking at me for guidance and direction. Right. And so, you know, crash course in and I made mistakes. And I think those mistakes were healthy and much needed.
Well, as we all do, as we all do. So how did you pacify this screaming baby?
Well, the thing was, the background story to this was that when Disability Direct was created, it was created in a very controversial way, in that there was another charity about 12 miles away in Ripley, which did the same thing. And Disability Direct was a kind of a break off from that charity. And so our potential peers or stakeholders, such as funders, and even some service users, said, well, we don't need to go to you. We've always used this other organization. So there was no, literally, when I joined, there was probably about, I think it was about 30 to 40,000 pounds left in the pot. No long-term plan in terms of income. And so it was screaming in that effect that he had no money. There was no food, no milk to feed the baby. And then I had these staff that were looking at me and saying, well, are we going to be redundant, or are we going to be here in 6 months' time, or what's the story, Amo? And I'd never written a funding bid. I'd never written a business plan. What I did have was youth and energy on my side, and I was hungry. I was hungry for knowledge. And the truth is, I bust my gut. I worked so hard for 6 months, probably a year actually, that I gave myself a mini stroke. I was working flat out. I had what's called a TIA, transient ischemic attack.
Yeah.
And it was all down to the fact that I felt this pressure. I felt this weight on my shoulders, not just the fact that I needed to deliver a service for disabled people who by then were coming through our doors regularly. But I also felt for these staff that were looking towards me. And then the other thing was, on a personal level, the charity had given me something that no other employer had done. You know, at that time I had 3 small children, and I was able to put food on the table. I was living in a council house before that with no prospects. You know, we were living day to day on benefits. So when I had this opportunity, I just thought, hang on, I've got a possibility of here doing something special, not just for the charity and disabled people in the city, but for myself personally. I have a purpose in life suddenly now.
Right.
And as a disabled person, I was, and this is down to Richard, one of the first things he taught me was to feel other people's pain, feel people's problems, and understand. He said, you as a disabled person are the only person that's going to understand their pain, because you've probably been through something similar in your own life. And he was right. Every time a query came through the door which raised their staff's eyebrows, I'd probably been through it. And so I knew what they were going through, and I knew what the remedy was that was needed to put on the table. So I started applying for funding. I became a fundraising expert overnight. I learned how to do business plans, but I'm entirely honest with you, I don't live and breathe by them. They're there. need them. I know some companies swear by them. I don't. I was self-taught, and I made a few mistakes. I became an employment law expert by mistake. So I made a few errors in terms of how I, maintained the staff and supported them during that time. Silly little schoolboy errors in terms of, shouldn't have made someone redundant in a certain way, but it was all done amicably. There's nothing untoward or anything like that. But I soon learned.
Right. Which is all you can ask of yourself, right? We all start out somewhere, don't we?
We do.
Can I ask how you manage the, being truly empathic and kind of knowing what people were going through and feeling it with them, if not for them? How did you look after yourself? Because it seems like you went from starting out in the charity to leading it very quickly, and then that whole ability to empathize and have compassion, if you absorb that can be a great burden, can't it? It's not that you don't care, but you've got to look after yourself. How did you do that?
Well, it's a demon that sits on my shoulder to today, in that I take things very personally. When other people are having problems and I hear about them, disabled people particularly, any type of discrimination, harassment, or prejudice, whether it's an individual or whether it's society or whether it's an employer behaving a certain way, I take it personally, and then it festers with me, and I bring them home. And my family, God bless them, they gave me the space. They realized I need to kind of work in this kind of little mess that I live in internally.
Right.
And the only way I could manage it was to get the solution. And once I've got the solution, I'd sit back for a short period until the next project, comes under my radar. And there were times when there weren't projects that I created them because I knew that was needed. My board of trustees have a little giggle every now and then now, because they know Amo's got this virtual invisible crystal ball where I can foresee where things are about to go with whether it's the voluntary sector, whether it's social care sector, or whether it's business. To this day, I have a 100% track record on predicting what the trends are going to be, which is probably one of the reasons I'm probably still here 28 years later.
Yeah.
The same company. And so I keep myself busy mentally. I cannot switch off for the life of me. And these crazy things, mobile phones have become, what's the right word? Some people use them as a tool. For me, it's become we have a symbiotic relationship now,
Right.
where I can, wherever I am, I can make notes, because I have a lot of my funding bids and stuff, a lot of my bright ideas that I've had when I'm doing the silliest things. I could be shopping in Sainsbury's and oh gosh, right, stop, trolley, quick, type something.
I recognize that too. I've got hundreds and hundreds of notes, and then I look back and I go, what was I on about? What am I talking about there?
Well, I have this silly, and it's crazy because I send myself text messages.
I send myself Facebook messages, especially if I found an article and I'm on a train or I'm in the middle of nowhere, I've got no time. I've got dozens of them. How funny.
Wow. Yeah, well, it shows you it works as well, because
yeah.
If I ever look at a message and I say, oh right, what did I say to myself? And then I go, yeah, right, that was a good idea. Let's work on that. And I have these sporadic little moments of genius, and believe me, it's not all good stuff. So every now and then I call it some real rubbish.
Well, we have to filter out that, right? We've got to get it out of ourselves so that the gold nuggets come, right?
That's right. But yeah, so it's been an interesting kind of journey. I mean, today I'm in a very luxurious position now, because I've worked hard in the very early days. The foundations are solid in the charity.
Right.
we now have,
Congratulations. I can see that. I saw from your website, that you've, turned over millions and millions now
well,
towards the charity.
it's nice. 51 paid staff now, and I think it's a 1.6 million turnover, which is a nice little. We've had some good growth now, and I've got 5 managers now who kind of do all the work. I'm just the grumpy old granddad in the corner that they come and visit every now and then, and float an idea past me. And so and that gives me the flexibility to do this kind of stuff and go out there and talk and spread the message.
Right, exactly. Which you're doing beautifully by the sounds of it. You talked about Richard Shaw helping you and downloading his view of leadership and his knowledge. Are you doing that with your leadership team now because you were inspired to do it by him? What do you do in your leadership that you feel proud of?
Well, I'll be honest with you, the way Richard Shaw taught me is very different to how I am offloading. And the truth is, Richard not only taught me leadership, he taught me grassroots disability movement stuff, which I had, as a disabled person, lived in ignorance all my life. As I say, I went to mainstream school. I went to, as I said, I joined a band. I was out there being a crazy teenager like most people are. And so I'd never had a mix in the disability world. And so his first thing was to install that kind of understanding in me. Leadership-wise, Richard was a pain in the neck to work for because he was quite dictatorial,
right.
but in a great way. It was his way or the highway, and I soon learned that there's that kind of boss as well, and it was effective. He got things done, and it was great. When I became a leader, one of the first things, as I say, I have managers now, and they will come into my office, and they'll, I think they've sussed me out now, but in the early days when they'd come to me with an issue, I would say, well, they say, Amo, how do we do this? Or what do you think about that? And I would say, well, I don't know, you tell me, what do you think? And then it's theirs. The idea or solution or whatever they've come up with, methodology is theirs. And the ownership is of that issue is theirs. And if they got it wrong, I wouldn't come down heavy-handed on them. I'd say, right, we made a little mistake, but you learn from that, didn't you? And I'm there, as I say, as the granddad in the corner. I don't show them how to do things. I haven't got a textbook that I've written to say, here, this is how you do it. What some of them have said, and some of them have read my book, and they've said, okay, we see why you are the way you are. We see what your management style is different to what you were, how you became a leader. We get
right.
it.
So what do you think is valuable as a leader? What is your role then?
Well, one of the first things I say quite comfortably, and this is something that a lot of leaders, I think, even to this day, struggle with. I say quite comfortably that the 5 managers that I employ are better than me. They can do stuff that I can't do, and that's managerial stuff that they can do, and they're there to. And I also run my business consultancy company called Amo Raju Associates, and I have 4 or 5 leaders that I'm mentoring now, or next generation leaders, and they all come to me with this idea that they should be the most knowledgeable person in the company because they are the leader. And I say, no, if that's the case, you might as well do the jobs yourself.
Oh, okay.
So if you know how to do it better, why are you paying someone else to do it?
Right. So be prepared to hire people that fill the gap or are better at something than you. They do that job that they're employed to do.
As a CEO, I have a finance manager, I have a deputy, I have a manager who looks after my payroll division, which is one of our trading arms. I have one that looks after disability consultancy. These guys are experts in their industry. There's no way I'm going to say I know how to do payroll. There's no way I'm going to say I know how to do Sage 50 or anything like that. These guys are employed because they're the experts in that. And what they will get from me is experience of what the mistakes Amo made. This is what he learned from them, and this is how the company benefited from learning from those mistakes. And so that's what they get from me. What I will provide to them is strategy, and say, 5 years down the road, this is where I want the charity to be.
So when they need your crystal ball, they come to you.
Yeah. And they don't always agree. And that's another thing, you have to be prepared that every now and then they're going to win the arm wrestle. And you need to let them win as well every now and then. Sometimes they don't realize I've let them have that one.
Because you do it in such a way that they accept it, and there is no conflict there. It's just
it. And I want them to know that if it wins, if they win at whatever they suggested and I disagreed with, then the company still wins. My ego isn't that. I've got a big ego, but not to the extent where I'll damage the company for the sake of it. It's got to be for the better. It's got to be for the greater good. But every now and then I'll say, I'll give you the classic example. 2 weeks ago, a week before last, I had an arm wrestle with my deputy, and let me take a step back. Most of the managers I've got, bar one, are roughly the same age range as me. And I have recently, because of my book, taken on the services of a PR company. And one of the first things the PR company said, Rama, you've got good social media presence, but we could elevate it, take it higher. Let's get you on Instagram, let's get you on TikTok. And I was like, oh gosh, here we go. I'm too old for that. I don't, my kids.
Completely get you.
I knew my kids were going to cringe when they saw Dad on TikTok. But I went with them because they're the experts. So I said,
right.
Yeah. So I now have a TikTok account, and I've seen the benefit of it already, because people are connecting with me or talking to me via Insta and TikTok who I would probably have never connected with. I have Facebook and I have LinkedIn, and I've got a fair amount of followers and friends on there. But this is a total new platform for me. So I said to my deputy, I said, Sally, we need to get Disability Direct on TikTok. And she had a even stronger reaction than I had when I was first offered that platform. And she said, no way, our service users don't go on TikTok. What are you on about, Amo? Stop being silly, blah, blah, blah. And I said, look, I've seen the benefits of it. Because of it, I've got, mentioned and known on a national scale, and you can only do the charity good if you put your projects out there. Anyway, we ummed and ahed for about 15 minutes, then she just looked at me and goes, right, okay, just to prove you wrong, I'm going to do
it. Brilliant.
And she did it, and within a few days, she's just a couple of posts that she'd put on were getting hundreds and thousands of views. And I said, fantastic. I rest my case, Your Honour.
Like you say, it's a win-win in the end.
Yeah. So if I win or she wins, the company wins. Either way, it's I'm not overly worried about that. So it's the issue about being a leader is that you've got to have people around you who have strong opinions. And if you've got people who's going to nod at everything you say, your company's not going to go anywhere.
Right. Well, it'll be limited to what you can do and see, won't it? Yeah.
You've got to
take it. Yeah.
We're at the stage now where the managers just do their projects and they ignite new projects. And some of the times I don't know about these new projects. In all honesty, I've said, I don't want to interfere. You've got your divisions, get on with them.
Yeah.
As a CEO now, I have to report to the board of directors and trustees, and I will get scrutinized on the bottom line. Are we in deficit? No, good. Get on, carry on doing what you're doing.
You're doing something right.
Yeah. So, and in all honesty, most boards of directors and trustees are always interested in that bottom line on the right-hand corner of that budget sheet. Sure. And so, and I've consistently kept that in a good state. So, and I passed that methodology, that philosophy back onto the managers. Say, do what you're doing. I also want to know about the deep issues still about what are happening in the community. So I am still very connected to the service users. Right. I want to talk to them because when I talk to them, I get to hear their problems firsthand, not through 3 sets of management.
I guess that means you know the services that are required as well if you keep.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what you're there for.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind this is the My Kind of Leader podcast, and it's got that double meaning. So it's about how the leader is kind to themselves and therefore to others, or the opposite. If there's a high level of inner brutality, that tends to be conveyed out. How do you run the charity and your own company and be kind to yourself so that you don't get poorly, so that you stay well, so that you enjoy it? How do those kindnesses
I
come in?
now listen a lot more to my other set of advisors, which is my wife and my children, which I didn't do for the last. I probably missed out at the beginning. I used to be a politician as well. I was a local councillor.
Okay.
2014 to 2019, they are years that my brain was in constant overdrive, and I was physically stressing myself out. I was working till 9, 10 o'clock most evenings, without a break and without the thanks. The politicians do not give the thanks when not nationally, locally. So I was exhausted and when I lost my seat in the 2019 election, everybody around me was really upset, but I was happy. I was like,
you could put it down. Oh yeah, that's amazing. So interestingly, you talked about an earlier burnout with the stroke, etc., because that's very common with CEOs that I work with burnout. It's not uncommon to have some kind of stroke or flare up in some kind of arthritis or migraine, or it's quite common. So it sounds like you've touched burnout again almost since then.
I had definitely then, and now I can say, because when I reduced my hours in my day job to be able to do the counselor job, and so once I lost my seat and got back into the office, into my day job routine, I started to plan my day a bit better. If I feel I need to finish at 3 o'clock, I will finish at 3 o'clock. It's not, before I was working religiously till 6, but and I didn't care. Even if there was no meeting, I was stuck in the office still doing stuff.
Yeah.
Now I clear my head. And the benefit of having an office at home as well now is I can log in for an hour and still get loads done. But one of the banes of being a CEO is that you are working 7 days a week because your mind never switches off. There are projects. Some of our projects are 7 days a week, 24 hours. So you are constantly thinking about those as well.
What do you notice? What are your symptoms for feeling getting full up or overwhelmed? Do you have, like, I get dizzy spells?
You're right. I can notice I get dizzier, and then I start eating rubbish as well.
Okay.
I start my weight. I have a funny relationship with the weight scales, because I go up and down regularly, and I can tell a lot of it's because I've started eating junk,
Right.
and I do that to compensate in some way for something or the other.
Okay.
So I know that if I'm reaching out for McDonald's a bit more often, then I know something's not right. And my family around me, as I say, the kids have got older now, and they're married now, and they don't necessarily have to listen to dad anymore. They tell me when I'm wrong. So
right. So do you notice that? Do you think, oh yeah, here I am grabbing them, I'm in the drive-through but before I know it, or something like that? Do you notice it?
I can see it, and I mean, I haven't done it for a while, but I can see the sign. And my daughter-in-law is a nurse, and she's I can see that you've got rosy red cheeks. That's not a good sign. Something's not right.
Right.
So
yeah.
It is. I've got the good structure around. I've got managers who actually care around me as well. They can see, and I had an episode. Oh gosh, what was it? About 7-8 months ago, I was sitting in the office and I suddenly felt a bit dizzy, and they were running around me with aspirins and ambulances and everything, and they were pumping my chest when it didn't need chest. I said, I'm fine, leave me up here. They go, fuck you. They just care a lot, and I know they do. And so I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by people who actually care. But my biggest health issue over the last 30 years is, and this is what the book is primarily about, has been depression and mental health. I didn't tell anyone that, but when I started at Disability Direct, obviously I think I mentioned earlier in this conversation that I was depressed when I was about depression, and for 30 years nearly, yeah, probably no, just under 30 years, I was having secret counseling sessions. Nobody knew about them. Even my wife didn't.
Right.
And you know, that was my biggest issue. And people always say now they've read the book, they can understand. But you know, when I did finally lift the lid off the box and let the world know that I was I call it a relationship. I had a relationship with depression. That they thought, well, hang on, you're a CEO. You're the strong. You're the strong kind of foundation in the company. We didn't see any signs, and that's because people with depression are often very good Oscar-winning actors. You know, right. they have this mask on which nobody kind of gets to know about until they actually do eventually reveal it. And that was my biggest thing as CEO, and of what we talked about earlier, the pressure that you feel, the burden, the weight that you have on your shoulders of all these people looking in your direction.
Yeah. But it sounds like you had like a parallel journey there. You had the depression, which must have been hard enough. And then you had the whole experience of keeping that hidden from everybody.
It was, you know, looking back on it, I can't understand how I did it.
Yeah.
You know, because but while I was too busy doing it, I was too busy living that, you know, dual life. You know, I would disappear sometimes for an hour here and there. Nobody knew where I was. That was the only time my phone switched off. And you know, the counsellor that you know, we had a bit of a banter. It almost became a friendship afterwards, because you know, she knew who I was. It got to a stage now. You know, even now she'd probably, you know, we've lost touch with each other now, but even now on reflection, she would probably say she probably breached some of her own codes in being a counsellor, because she'd tell me off, and you know, and because it got to that level of understanding. After 30 years, you get to know someone.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to presume why you kept it hidden, but obviously the societal culture and certain familial cultures will be, there's a stigma around issues around mental health.
Yeah.
If you feel able,
well,
don't feel need to. What? Yeah, it'd be great to know why you wanted to keep it
happy
hidden.
to. Well, the issue is, I'm going back to the 90s, where mental health and depression was just not really discussed in the open, or in the workplace, or in families. I come from the South Asian community, which just doesn't understand it, doesn't know how to deal with it at all. But also as a man, you know, some of the male ego, the machismo that you're supposed to have, that you're in control, you're the solution to all problems within the family environment, within, you know, as a CEO, as I said, all eyes look towards me. And if I let anybody know that, hang on, I'm wrestling with demons on an hourly basis, you know, it just didn't click with me. And I mean, one of the things I say in the book is, you know, people say you should talk to people. We men, particularly, if we socialize with friends, and I can do this regularly, if I go and meet my friends for a beer, you know, the conversation often starts with how many beers we drank last week, or what was the football like last night, or did you watch the cricket? We were robbed. It's all male macho kind of conversations.
Yeah.
Very rarely do we start, which without sounding sexist, I have observed women do the exact opposite. Women will start a conversation with, guess what's effing me off? Guess what peeing me off?
Yeah.
And they offload. And I say this in the book, why can't men that have that same conversation? It's still manly to say, guess what's annoyed me today? There's nothing,
Yeah, no, you're so right. And I think in that last 30 years as well, like women's conversation has changed to, how are you?
Yep.
No, are you really? So
Yeah.
if you find you go, oh yeah, I'm fine, but are you really? Because you haven't spoken for a while, or I haven't heard from you. So we'll call our friends out on that in a way as well. If the person's truly wanting to know, they won't let you get away with just fine. So you're taking the conversation to, actually, I've had a shit week.
Yeah, and that's it. If you can start the conversation that way, you will not realize it, but you've broken down barriers, and whoever you're talking to, they'll probably offload as well. And without realizing it, we're having a peer counseling session.
Sure. Yeah. I guess we try to we inadvertently catastrophize talking about feelings per se, though, don't we? If I say I have depression, or I feel depressed, or I feel angry, we catastrophize it and almost think, oh, we are just saying we're an angry person, or I'm a depressed person, but we're many things.
Yeah.
We could be all of it. We can have happy times and have depression. We can belly laugh and have depression. It's really interesting.
And that's the thing. We kind of, one of the things I always show, I mean, a lot of people who read the book say, gosh, Amo, your book's so funny. We did when we were buying a book and looking at your back cover and saw your journey about depression, we didn't realize there'd be some very comedic elements in there.
Right.
And I always say that people with mental health problems, they do laugh as well. They do have those silly moments, those episodes that everybody else does as well. It's just that when they're down, they're really down. And
absolutely. And I guess that's testament to what you did, was to keep it hidden enough so nobody could read what was really going on.
And that was it. And my issue was, I was terrified, absolutely terrified, that if those same people that in some ways idolized me for whatever I had done with Disability Direct, they would see me in a very weak, as a poor, vulnerable person instead. And those kind of things, the longer I became, as soon as I became a CEO, I think I was CEO in '97. It was just definitely not going to happen that I was going to come out and say, guess what, guys, I have counseling sessions.
Right.
And this was a regular thing that almost started a conversation I had with my counselor at the time. She used to say, have you told anybody yet? And I'd say, no, it's not going to happen, not telling anyone.
Right. Or like it is a confession, like there's this bad thing about me that you don't know. If you knew this bad thing about me, you won't want to know me and you'd take my job.
That was it.
And because the work that I do with CEOs globally is to help them work on that internal narrative, which is, it's often not the other people thinking, crumbs, he's weak. It's that feeling about oneself.
Yeah.
I'm not who I say I am. And I'm hiding this, and I'm less than because I've got whatever the issue is.
Yeah.
And then we project it onto other people. So on that vein, when you did talk about it, what was the reaction?
The reaction was there was a lot of shock and disbelief. There are still members within my own family that still don't fully believe what they've read about, because they said, no, that's not the Amo we know.
Right.
There is also, the wider community in terms of my colleagues at work and the staff. They've clicked on it. I spent, obviously, as you know, when you're in the office, you normally spend more time with your work colleagues than you do with your family when you add the hours up. And so they clicked on it. They go, okay, we can see it. We understand it. But people. One of the questions I get asked is, why now? Why? What was it that made you think, right, I'm ready to talk? And a lot of that was at the beginning of lockdown, pretty much when Boris announced that to the country, you're going to go into lockdown. I was sat at home and I thought, I don't know how long this is going to go on for. What do I do now? I could run. The company was running itself, and I was not out there being in the media, being my annoying self. I thought, I've got to do something, and that's when I reached out to my co-writer Manny, who I'd never met. And the only reason I reached out to her was on her LinkedIn. She said she's got severe depression. And I thought, brilliant.
Oh, wow.
So and she'd never written a book. So
Right.
People say to me, why did you go to Manny? You could have gone to get your story to a professional to write the story for you. And I said, no, because I had a link, just like we are now. I had a first conversation with Manny, and we had a chat for about 20 minutes. And within 20 minutes, I said, she's the one, she's going to write my book.
Amazing.
And that's what we did over lockdown. And as each week we'd have a Zoom session where I would tell her exactly what happened, and she could start formulating how the story was going to go. And it felt like I was having the counselling sessions again, because I was offloading to her.
Yeah.
There were times I would switch once the Zoom had finished, I'd burst into tears because it was all coming back again. And but see, these are things I'm saying now that I would never have said years ago.
Yeah.
And one of the things reason I can do it now is because when I look back, in the last 2-3 years, I've started to win awards for my work, and recognized for the work I've done and the difference, touch wood, that I've made in disability movement locally. And my wife said something very interesting to me. She said, you've done it now. You're there. You've got the track record. Your CV says you've raised millions and millions in money. You've created businesses, successful businesses. You mentor people. And that's when I thought, you know what? I've got nothing to lose.
Right. Amazing.
Now is the time for me to go out and say, oh, guys, guess what? And I was depressed.
And the flip side of that is that not only have you got nothing to lose, but you're giving such an enormous gift of your experience to the world. Like, it's out there now. Yes, and yeah, it is incredible. I hope you're proud of yourself. Not that I'm telling you how to feel.
No. The pride's very nice, and every now and then I'll have a little cheeky smile when I look in the mirror, thinking, okay, we did that, and the book's doing well. But what, like you've just hit on it there, to be honest with you, what's the most rewarding, in a strange way to say this, but it is rewarding, is that a conversation has come to the surface, which probably there's a lot of I spoke to 6 or 7 publishers now who said they were interested in taking the book off me, because I self-published this, and I've so far I've resisted it. But what it has done, a lot of disabled people have come forward and said, Amo, the stuff you mentioned that you went through in the 90s or the 60s or 70s or the 80s, we're still going through that today.
Right.
We're going through, and in a strange way, it's brought those conversations and given those people the confidence to start talking about their own experiences. But it's also shown that the world has not moved on when it comes to the conversation around disability, particularly around disability in the South Asian community. There's a movement that's just started on social media now called Chronically Brown, and most of the members, a lot of their members, have contacted me and said, "You've inspired us to start talking about ourselves. We wouldn't probably have done this." And these are people in their late teens and 20s.
Right.
And I thought, if nothing else, my biggest achievement is that there is a whole generation of disabled people coming to the surface and saying, I'm disabled, I'm proud, and this is what I'm going through at the moment.
So you've created another movement, and I guess the purpose of all movements is to make a change for the better, right?
I think
So
I
it's a
think creative is probably a strong word. I mean, that was there already. What I've probably done is steered it a little bit.
yeah, good.
They were there already. They just needed. I think they found me to be some kind of mentor to them, and
Great.
they're all in. I get constant WhatsApps and emails and Facebook and Instagram messages from hundreds of people now who just want to talk to me, and I try and make sure I stay on top of those. I don't want to let people down, but it's nice that the conversation is happening, because that's all I really wanted. I wanted the society to raise its awareness about what it was doing and what it was doing wrong.
Well, I mean, on that note, I do really appreciate you spending time with me today and sharing this with the My Kind of Leader audience. I'm enamored by you and your work, and hopefully there'll be more conversations to come. What do you think is the imperative, as a way of like finishing? What's the imperative for leadership, do you think, if it was to be prescribed, or what's your feeling that we need to pay attention to?
I was asked something very similar last week. I'll adapt to that answer now. One of the things I feel, I mean, as I said, leaders aren't born. They're not. There is no manual for leaders. I think there's a lot of talent out there in the workforce. And even if it's not in the workforce, even within community settings, there are leaders that come through. You could find leadership within, community policy, community representation. And a lot of these people, men and women, have got massive talents, but they're not exposed. They're not given the opportunity. And this question I was asked last week, and I'll say I'll read that the answer. One of the things I always say to employers now, there's a few companies that have asked me about, looking out for the next generation of leaders in their companies. What's their formula? What's my formula? And I always say this: in any work environment or any community environment, it's often the loudest that get noticed by management. So and so, John or Jane is fantastic at their delivery. Aren't they great? They should be promoted because they're inspiring for the other staff. And I say, no. Look for the ones that are quiet, because if they're quiet, there's a reason why they're quiet, not because they're not good at their job. They're probably delivering the same. It's just because John or Jane are very confident and loud. Their marketing of their own persona is probably, shall we say, stronger than their actual delivery.
Right.
And whereas John or Jane who are quiet, they probably will be able to deliver, but they just need you to give them a little pull up the ladder. And
Very, very good point. And I guess those ones that are quiet are listening.
That's it. And I say, I give myself as the example. I was volunteer, unemployed, no skills, and somebody saw the quiet, terrified individual who lacked confidence, and gave me the opportunity. To this day, I worship the guy for I wouldn't be where I am. My kids wouldn't have gone to university. I wouldn't be living in a nice detached house, driving a nice car, because he saw something in me. And he could have gone for the loud ones in the room, but he didn't.
He could have not done anything, right? So it was a true kindness. Do you think kindness belongs in leadership?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's too easy to become, quite Hitlerite. It's too easy to say, this is how I want it, and I'm not interested in any other way. And too often some people think being a leader is being stern, but you've got to show that you're human. Every now and then I'll take the team out. Right, we're going for a meal at lunchtime. It's on me. Or I'll bring in a whole 6 boxes of birds cakes for the staff.
Nice.
Eat away, or it's quiet this afternoon, close down, let's go home. Not all the time, every now and then.
Sure. And one of the subtle kindnesses that I thought that you mentioned earlier was that you model that if you need to finish at 3, you do.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important kindness in leadership, that you model looking after yourselves, and you don't take yourselves to overwhelm all the time. Obviously you have to sometimes, but you don't stay at that
No,
bandwidth.
There's a lot of issue about trust as well. You have to trust those staff. They're, particularly in the charity sector, I'm going to be honest with you, we don't pay well in the charity sector. So I've always said that if people are working for my charity, 9 times out of 10 it's because of the passion. They often do, and they can go and get better paid jobs elsewhere. But if they're staying with me, that means that they care about what the cause is, and they need to be rewarded for that. We've got to find a way of keeping them, and you've got to trust them. And if I was one of those guys 10 years ago, if my staff said to me, I want to work from home, I would have thought, yeah, that ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, right.
Because but the pandemic threw something at me which made me realize you've got no choice. You're gonna have to trust them. And not only were they performing, some of them were outperforming.
Yeah. That was very common.
I was wrong, and so we've got to embrace that. I've got a whole division now, my payroll team now, and there's 14 of them. They don't come to the office, they work at home.
Right.
And they delivered after 2,500 clients. So
that's amazing, isn't it? I mean, that was one of the great offshoots, wasn't it, of the lockdown, that actually people were able to show and give evidence that actually I do work hard at home, and we can have this kind of hybrid working environment. It's come up several times in perhaps a good way that kindness and care and trust is all intertwined in leadership. And I really appreciate your time today and your candor. Thank you so much. All of your details, with your permission, will be with the show notes, but where would you prefer people to find you?
Well, look, I mean, here's the story.
You got TikTok, Insta.
Social media. If you look for search Amo Raju, you'll probably find me on most of the platforms now. But I mean, most people go through my website, amoraju.com.
Okay.
That most people find me that way now. And I mean, the story of Amo Raju and the story of Disability Direct are so intertwined. They go hand in hand. If you Google one, the other one comes up as well. It's just the way it works. So either way, through Disability Direct or through amoraju.com, people will find me.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thank you for your time. And by the way, anybody that watches this on YouTube, this is the book, and it's on Amazon, isn't it? Walk Like a Man. I can see that it's an amazing read. I've dipped into it and was like, oh my gosh, that's going to have to go on holiday with me later on in the year.
But people that take it on holiday,
oh no, I can see that it's fascinating. And thanks so much, not just for your time, but for what you've given to the world. And I know there's going to be thousands of people that are better off for you.
Well, thank you very much. You're too kind.
Take care. Well, let's stay in touch, Amo. And thanks again. Have a lovely afternoon.
And yourself. See you.
Take care. Bye-bye.